Do you notice that I am wearing a hat I've never worn
Yes.
since you've known me?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think this hat came to be?
Someone gave it to you.
No, I bought it. Now,
Oh,
let's say out of 100 podcasts that you and I record, how many of which can you see my hair and how many of which I'm wearing a hat? Out of 100.
I can see your hair maybe 10 times out of 100.
So maybe 9 out of 10 times I'm wearing a hat.
Yes.
Fair? I
Yeah.
agree with you. Okay, that's how I am in life as well. I got to get real dolled up for something. I won't wear the hat. I'm not hiding a bald head like you would be. I have a full head of hair that I kind of like, but I like hats. Now, think of those 9 out of 10 episodes that I'd be wearing a hat. It's like 9 out of 10 of those are the same hat. Is that correct? Do you agree with that? Do you remember what hat it is?
I think it's New Era snapback mesh top.
All my hats are that.
Oh, okay.
It's got a camo configuration. Well, that hat is an extension of my body. And the reason I'm wearing this dumb new hat is because the old hat is sitting at the bottom of a lake. And it broke my heart, Brakken. And I have to wear this dumb hat. That's what I found out.
Huh.
It's terrible. I thought, we were up for my birthday weekend up on Leech Lake in Minnesota. And it was very wavy. And the waves were splashing the windshield of the boat. And I couldn't see where I was going. Because every time the boat hit, the waves splashed up. And I needed to see, so I poked my head up above the windshield while we're going like 35 miles an hour. And that hat got just wiped clean from my head. Whoosh. In the water. I cried for like 10 minutes. So it's the first time I cried in like a decade. It was a horrible experience.
That you lost a part of you.
It's like an appendage. But more important than that, whatever that would be. My soul.
So have you not been able to source that exact hat anywhere?
I have to go back to a specific resort and International Falls to find this hat, if it's still there from 2 years ago. I feel like I finally got it broken in. Takes that long to break in a good hat. Yeah. Anyways, I thought maybe you'd say something, but you because it's the same hat every time.
I was going
to.
Have
you ever done something like that? Something so stupid?
Yeah, I've done plenty of stupid things, but I was going to say something, but the last 3 episodes, I said, I've never seen that shirt on you. Is that new? You said, no, I just don't really wear this very often. So I see this new hat and I thought, whatever, he's just digging deeper into the closet. I'm not making a big deal about it.
Not in the closet, Brakken. Do you wear hats? You never wear hats.
I wear hats anytime I'm going to run long enough to either burn the top of my head or sweat straight down my face into my eyes. I think people forget or just don't have any reason to realize how much your hair acts as a headband to stop sweat from running into your eyes. I don't have that luxury. And I have a sloping head, Kirk. It angles down. It's not going off to the sides. It's coming straight down into my peepers.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
It's like all weekend I wear a hat at the track. So I got to keep the sun off my head.
Most bald people I know wear hats as much as I do, like all the time, as it becomes their default. But not you. You wear it proud, or don't wear it proud.
I wear it as is, I suppose. My take is that the less often someone sees you in something, the more it's a surprise when they see it. So I just keep the baldness out as much as possible. There's never any cold water moment to anyone.
That makes sense. I will say, I'm not hitting on you or anything, but there's not many people who look good with a bald head. Or I'm like, they look like their best with a bald head. You may be one of the exceptions that may look as good or better bald than you do or did with hair. Would you agree with that?
I know it's been so long.
It works for you.
I agree that it probably works because I don't have a funky shaped head. but I think most people would still prefer, if they were honest, some hair.
Well, I still think that from time to time. You pull it off.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So since we're getting to know each other, should we continue to get to know each other today as we did on Tuesday?
We shall dive deep in. Oh, frog in my throat here, Kirk. Dive deep into the recesses of our memories and jog up some old experiences.
Well, this was your idea for Tuesday's episode. This recent Tuesday, and what I think you shared 3 stories. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And I shared 2 of horrifying running memories. And at the end of the episode, I sort of did a call to action, just saying like, hey, if you want, we kind of got cut off because we didn't have a ton of time that day, and said, hey, if you want to hear more, like, do you want to just tell you things, and you may or may not learn anything, but hopefully be entertained. And we got like, I don't know, a handful of messages saying like, yeah, please, like, I want to hear more. It's a nice change of pace. So here we are.
People like hearing other people struggle.
Makes them feel better about their own crappy lives. Is that what you think?
I don't think that second part is what I was insinuating, but I'll roll with that.
I'm a little more brash at times than needed, I know. So my question for you then, because this was originally your idea, is do you want to stick down the lane of like bad experiences today, or do you want to have some good ones thrown in there?
I don't mind brightening some days from time to time, but I'm certainly going to start with another bad one that you prompted the memory of.
All right. Well, tell me about your bad experience, your bad running experience.
My first triathlon, Kirk, much like yours. I'd forgotten about this.
Okay.
Camp Whitcomb Mason Triathlon. It was like a super sprint, I think they were calling it. So the swim was disproportionately long compared to the run. So it was struggle bus time for me. I got out and I swam twice that week prior to the race to quick bone up on my swimming, which really only left like my shoulders, lats, pecs, tired, depleted for race day. So how this started was Lisa was teaching elementary school at the time. I was teaching in a neighboring town, and she had a coworker who was about the same age as us and super into cycling, running, also just got into triathlons the year before. And he was very like lightheartedly, but deep down serious competitive with Lisa and her running. Every day, he'd come into school and he'd pop his head into a room and say, "What'd you run this morning?" And then he would one up whatever she ran. He'd run it a mile farther or faster pace on average. And we had run the St. Patrick's Day 5K run in Lake Geneva, and he had beat her and had like talked that talk afterwards. And one day he was like, "I could beat your husband in triathlon too." And I was racing, like I had already the year prior taken third at Spartan Worlds. Like I was doing the endurance thing already. And I was in really good shape. And she came home. She's like, "Please do this. Like someone needs to shut this man up." Like they were friends, but she was so sick of his talk. So I signed up for the triathlon. I didn't own a bike at the time. I swam those 2 times, but I was minutes faster than him at anything running related. Like he was racing Lisa in a 5K, and Lisa's a fast runner. But he was minutes slower than me across the board. So I didn't really care what was going to happen. I knew he'd outswim me by a little bit. I thought I'd probably match or even exceed him on the bike, because how hard can biking be? I'd done a few bike rides and you can rest at the top of the hills and I could hammer in between. So I was going to be fine. And then I was just going to trash him on the run. And I came out of the water very similar to you, Kirk. I wasn't in last, but it was only me and I guess what I would call the mom fitness class crowd.
Okay. Yeah.
People that were just there because their mom class that they go to for fitness all decided to do this together. I came out of the water with them, with just utterly destroyed by how bad my swim was. And he was like, I don't know, by the time I got out of transition, I think he was like 7 minutes ahead of me.
Did Lisa give you that update as she was spectating?
I didn't know that until
How do you
afterwards,
know?
but the look on her face said it all. And I had borrowed her brother's bike for this, and I had put the front tire on incorrectly. And so the odometer chip sensor didn't line up with the other sensor. And so I had no idea what I was doing, speed or RPM wise. And I could only get a few of the gears to work. So again, your story really reminded me of this. And I just thrashed myself on this bike. It was a 22-mile bike in the Kettle Moraine area, which was very, very hilly. And at about mile 20, I was done, completely trashed. And I thought, it's okay. I've done this before. I've biked hard. I'm going to recover the second I start coasting. So I coasted like the last 100 meters down into transition and just thought, I am going to run so fast. And I dismounted, a flying dismount off the bike, and both legs jelloed on me. Both buckled, and I hit the ground and just realized there's been a terrible mistake made. And I don't know what's going to happen. And in that 5K, I ran something like 1930 all out. It cost me everything. By the end, I had a rainbow of stomach cramps that went basically from my left hip up around my entire abdomen down to the other side. I had tears in my eyes. I was surging like 10 seconds trying to run and then 10 seconds just wallowing in pity by the end. It was those 19 and a half minutes took so much out of me. I surged out of transition the best I could. And as soon as I got out of sight, I walked for like 100 meters because I didn't know what was happening to my body. It was horrendous. So your triathlon experience very much mirrored my first triathlon, and he beat me by like probably a minute and a half or 2 minutes total. And I got to keep talking that talk.
That's so embarrassing for so many reasons. Lisa has to deal with this guy at work now, and he's even more confident and cocky in his ability to crush the Crockers. You went to defend your wife's honor, and you failed in battle. Have you ever had another crack at this guy? Is that it? Is he 1-0 against you?
Only running races. We've never done another thing on his turf. So no, he is undefeated and untied against me in triathlon.
Yeah, I know it's funny about the walking and transition. So I guess we haven't talked about this, but I have 3 triathletes I'm coaching right now.
Okay.
And so the biggest thing, and they've all done triathlons before. I have 2 people doing Ironmans this year, Brakken. Do you know that? 2 Ironmans. OCR.
That's an undertaking.
OCR tackling their first Ironman. 2. Anyways, I learned very early that transition from the bike to run, if you think you're an aerobic monster and you can go run a 30-mile long run and be okay, but you can't bike 10 miles and then have to run a 5K, because whatever it does to your legs ruins you. And the summer before, the story I told you on Tuesday about my horrible pro debut in the triathlon, I did the local lake triathlon, which was roughly a sprint distance. It was 4 miles around the local lake, a swim that was all fine and dandy, so to speak, but I had not practiced transitions, and I was in the lead. It was a small 30-person triathlon. It wasn't a highly competitive one. And I went to run, and my legs almost gave out on me, and I walked the first 100 meters, tried to run, had to walk again. I think I was coming off of being a 4 miler, we'll call it, and I think I ran like 6:50 pace for that 4 miles, all out.
Yeah. Yep.
And my legs didn't function. And that day, I learned how important the bricks were. So all the triathletes I coach every Thursday, our skill day, midweek long run day is now, I don't care what we're doing, they're brick days. You've got to brick at least once a week because you can't access your running if you don't. So I learned that same lesson. Luckily, it was a watered down field and I could get away with it, but I had to walk my first run as well in my first triathlon in the beginning.
So embarrassing. So embarrassing. I was on the Spartan protein at the time. I had like a minor Reebok deal, and I was out here getting trashed by just every random person at this thing. But I will say this, I did one about 5 years later in Lake Geneva. The Escape Tri-Series came to Lake Geneva, and I did it. And I did 2 transition, or what you would call a brick workouts in the final 8 days leading up to this. And I thought, this feels easy. Maybe not easy, but this feels normal. This feels like OCR.
Okay.
And so I get there on race day and I hammered the bike again with the same kind of strategy, but just not quite as, like, I backed off the last mile to make sure I was okay. Came in, very heavy legs still, got off the bike and was like smiling out of transition. Like, yep, this is OCR. Okay, I'm good now.
Yeah.
So off 2 brick workouts, it was really like I'd spent 5 years doing brick workouts, because it felt no different than getting to the top of a climb in Tahoe or Killington, or finishing off a bucket carry, or doing a double sandbag, or doing like rolling mud after having just descended for 2,000 feet and then having to run again. It felt exactly the same, except I hadn't run yet. So my legs are good. And I think I ran like 16:55 that day off. And 5K triathlon run courses are notoriously off distance wise, but I wore a GPS for it and it was right around 17 minutes. So I got like 2.5 to 3 minutes faster in the 5K in a triathlon just from OCR training. It really translated over.
I'd take that one step further and say that if you are a hybrid focused athlete, that may be the smoothest transition to a triathlon. Maybe vice versa, but not. I don't think it would quite work in reverse way as smoothly. But hybrid,
They've had a few
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sebastian Kienle, who is a world champ, has done a high rocks, and I'm blanking on this other gentleman's name. He's been on the podium at World Intermediate course, I believe, and he did one, and they all struggled with the strength grind of a high rocks. But yeah, sure. I think OCR long course or hybrid would make fantastic transitions over to triathlon, because it's about trash your quads and your lower back, and now go get to work.
Yep. With legs that aren't used to firing in the running motion, which is also just like the efficiency piece, gathering that quickly. And interesting. Are those the 2 triathlons you've done? Those 2?
I've done 3. I don't remember what the third one was. I'm blanking.
Sounds important.
But that second one I talked about went much better. I was able to hold 22 or so miles per hour on the bike and run 5 mid on the run, I think 520s probably on the run, and just purely off I was training for the Tahoe Ultra that year. Just translated over pretty nicely. And I could swim better by then. I'd done enough swimming throughout the years for OCR that I was a much improved swimmer.
Well, and I know like a lot of the workout styles that we prescribe for OCR or hybrid, there's 2 sort of components. It's 3 components. Get the heart rate up in a way other than running sometimes. Get your hands over your head on the bar and work overhead while breathing heavy. Or the third, which is just blow the legs up and then make yourself run, right? Which we often do with things like tuck jumps or jump squats or burpee broad jumps, and then go run a 400 and then repeat without rest. Those are styles like we really like to, it works for me, frying the legs and then running interval sessions. Like that's exactly what biking into running is. So that makes sense. And I know that your philosophy, you did a lot of jump lunging and jump squats and those things mid run. So,
and I want to be clear. I'm not saying triathlon's easy, and I'm not even saying I'd be particularly good at triathlon. All I'm saying is that T2 is that mythical demonic beast of triathlon. And that's what OCR is. It's one repeat workout of T2 over and over and over. So that type of fatigue and pain was what we were used to.
Yeah.
Not at all saying it's an easy sport.
Well, I'm waffling over where to start with my first story. So I think I'm going to start with a poop story.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are.
And it's been a long time since I've had issues like that on a run. Actually, I should knock on wood. Like if you run enough, you end up running into problems that way, especially if you're a morning runner, like roll out of bed into your shoes. Morning runner tends to get you every once in a while. I don't know if you've experienced that.
Oh yeah.
And there's a chance I've told this years ago, and I don't remember why I would have, but this was college, and I was working a job in which I had to go in early sometimes. I had to be in between 7 and 8. So I had to get into the habit of rolling out of bed into my running shoes so I could get it done before going to work. So it was like earlier mornings than I was accustomed to. In college, we didn't get up and run at 5 in the morning or roll out of bed. Like, I don't know if you did, but our practices were in the afternoon. And sure, we raced in the mornings, but it was 10 a.m., right? Or something. It was never like roll out of bed. Anyways, body was adjusting, needless to say. And I left mom's house. I stayed with my parents in the summers between semesters. So I was training for cross country. I headed down the road to my favorite park, Colburn Park, which is where we held our local cross country high school races. I was going to do some loops there for a long run and head back. Longish run. At the time, that'd be like 10 miles or 12 miles, whatever. Anyways, I only get like a mile, 2 miles into this thing, and I realize I'm in trouble. And I'm in very dense residential area in which there's no options. There's no options. There's no businesses. There's nothing. I'm sort of in this the businesses wouldn't even be open. And I'm like, oh boy, like, what am I going to do here? We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
And I know house is 2 miles back. Colburn Park's a mile ahead, which was my original destination, to run a couple loops and then come home. So I'm like, I got to figure this thing out. And so now I'm to the point where like I'm very, very nervous. There's enough morning traffic on the road too. It's like the main run that goes through the residential area. Anyways, I start doing the run walk about a half a mile out, and you shove your hand in your butt crack to make sure everything stays where it should. It was like one of those where I'm starting to...
I've never used the door stopper.
I'm exaggerating slightly, but that's where I was at. God, I was, I don't know, 19 at the time, half a lifetime ago. Anyways, and so I'm doing the run shuffle, and the cramps would sort of go away, and I'd run another 50 meters and go away. And I was like, I know there's 3 bathrooms in Colburn Park. Like, I'm going to hit the closest one. I'm cutting through the woods at this point, doing this run, shuffle jog, and I finally crest the hill, and I'm like, oh my God, thank God, there's the bathroom. The bathroom that's always open. It's always open. And so... in my misery, I'm wondering if I can even make it there, right? But at least I'm in the park. If I need to, I'm sort of alone now. Nobody's around at all. And I shuffle, walk, run with the most pain in my tummy, we'll call it, I can remember experiencing. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I'm like, sort of speed, shuffle, clinch walking to the door. And I get to the door and I pull on the handle and it's locked. And in that very moment, my body knew it was going to be able to go to the bathroom, was planning on going to the bathroom, and fully intended on going to the bathroom. And so I did what any man or woman in this situation would do. I used the handle as a brace. I grabbed on, dropped my pants, and went right there in front of the bathroom door. Because I had no choice. And so then I, with the pants down, waddled to a clump of trees, which was like 40 yards away. Found some leaves, cleaned myself up very, very shamefully, and then continued on my run, which is always uncomfortable. When you do the leaf cleanup, it doesn't go well. Mm-hmm. And I have to imagine the story that told when the maintenance guy or whoever it was went to unlock the bathrooms in the morning. He went to go unlock that one, and the story is going to tell itself, right? He's going to walk up to unlock it, or she, and he's going to be like, well, I can tell you what happened here. It doesn't take a crime myth buster to figure out the exact scenario in which played out for whoever that poor soul was. That poor soul was me. So the old went to the bathroom right outside the bathroom on the concrete right there, right in front of the door. You ever have that happen to you, Brakken?
Yes and no, not as an adult. I had it happen when I was a kid. I was playing Strikeout. It's a baseball game at the park with my friends, and I waited a little too long. And I told them, like, shouted out because it's funny. Oh, I'm about to poop my pants. Ha ha! I gotta go home. And I hopped on my bike and I pedaled home as fast as I could. And about halfway there, I realized this is diarrhea, and we're touch and go. And I pooped my pants running through our front door. And I just like started crying. I was probably like 9. Old enough you shouldn't 19. Be pooping your pants. young enough. Like you can cry and your parents will come help you. So they put
Right
me
in
in
the
the
sweet spot.
shower. I showered. They took care of my clothes. Luckily, I was young enough that they were willing to clean that out for me. And then I heard my friends come over as I was getting out of the shower, and and I hear them say, "Hey, can Brakken come play?" And my dad said, "No, he's gonna be done for the night." And I tried to sneak past the door, and they're like, "Hey!" And I stopped, and I was in new clothes, and my hair was wet from the shower, and it was just painfully obvious what had happened. I sprinted home to poop, and they saw me 10 minutes later in fresh clothes, freshly showered. And they
Well,
never said
9-year-olds aren't
anything,
that
but
sharp.
I knew
Maybe
that they
they
knew.
missed over it.
No, they knew.
That's embarrassing. I remember you telling me, and this won't be an episode about stories like this, but didn't you tell me something where you were trying to impress your friends at a party?
Yeah.
You're playing like ping pong or beer pong, and you had to sit there and pretend like it didn't just happen.
I'll tell this one because it involves exercise in the most roundabout way. We were at a school meeting at this girl's house after school. And when we were done, she had a pool table in her basement. And I had a crush on her at the time. It was maybe mutual, but I was a late bloomer in every sense of the word and was never, ever going to act on it. But so it was just awkward for the sake of being awkward. And we're playing pool, and I didn't think she was in an adjacent room, and we're with my friends, and I have a real good fart, and I let it out, and everyone's like, "Man, that was a great fart. You crushed it." Like, absolutely, I did. And we keep playing, and I have another one that feels even bigger, and I decide to bear down on it, and I just explosively diarrhea right in my pants. Explosively. And so I'm in the basement of my crush. Ugh. I have to go past the room she's in to get out of the house. And my pants are full. Like you just turned on a fire hose for a quarter second, but the fire hose was filled with sour water. And the worst part about this entire thing is not any of this so far. The worst part is that I'd come straight from basketball practice, and I hadn't planned on doing this. I'd forgot about the meeting, so I didn't bring extra clothes after basketball. So when I had sweat through everything, I just decided to go commando, pulled my jeans on, and went over to her house. So I wasn't wearing underwear. So there was no containment. It was just power washed into the back. It was like acid washed jeans, but from the inside, but with poop. And
which is acidic.
On top of that, I hadn't done laundry yet that week, and I had borrowed my dad's jeans that morning.
That's right.
Yeah, so I had explosively pooped my dad's pants with no underwear on in the basement of this person that I had a secret crush on. And so I excused myself out of the house with trying not to do that stiff-legged pogo walkout so that your cheeks don't rub together. And I get outside, and I'm in this. Now the second worst thing's going because I am 2 miles from my house, and I biked here, and I have to bike home. And like, there's no good way of biking with diarrhea in your dad's jeans. It's just not. Because if you sit down on the seat, it's not an option.
Good way to do most anything with diarrhea in your dad's jeans. No. Biking would be up on the list. Yeah.
You can't sit on the seat. That's a non-starter. You can't stand straight up because it's going to go right down your leg, straight out the bottom into your socks, into my white Reebok Classics. That's a non-starter as well. So I had to do this like weird hunch where I tried to keep it sitting in the butt and thigh area of my jeans by staying like crouch. I lowered the seat down and like crouch, held a wall sit while biking. Mm-hmm. And it was just the worst ride of shame you could imagine doing. And then I get home, and it's like 9 p.m. It's dark. I don't want my parents to know that I pooped my dad's pants. So I took my pants off behind the garage and got out the garden hose and sprayed them out into our compost pit, and then sprayed myself down over the compost pit, and then grabbed some scrub towels we had, like oil rags from the garage, and patted myself down the best I could, and then snuck downstairs into the basement, and washed them by hand in the sink and then threw them in the laundry and then grabbed dirty clothes from the laundry and snuck back upstairs. It was just the entire time with a 10 out of 10 shame level for like this entire 40-minute process.
Have you ever told Pete about that?
Yeah, so 3 years ago at Christmas, I came clean. In front of God and everyone.
Those jeans should have been tossed out. Poor Pete. But I think
I
the
cleaned
real
the heck
victim in
out
this
of
situation.
them, but I don't know. I mean, it gets into the fibers of the fabric. I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
That sounds horrifying. And then we're going to move on to a running story. A running mishap.
So there was biking
worst
involved.
moment running.
It was kind of like a triathlon.
Oh,
that was my fitness component.
Oh, that's. But how do you
My heart rate
miscalculate
was
so
pegged?
Okay. But how does somebody miscalculate what's about to happen that bad? I mean, a fire hose, like that's a pretty bad misunderstanding of what's about to happen.
But it was just like a blip of it. It's just done. It wasn't like I'd turn the
understand.
hose off.
I understand.
Okay. But, you're young, you're excited, you don't have a lot of worldly experience yet. You're probably greased up on Bugles and Mountain Dew, and things just they get away from you.
And one of the few cards to play that you have in your positives column is ripping them in front of your friends. Like one of the things you're good at.
No. I had all sorts of things.
You have to use it.
I was a junior in high school.
All right.
Fart's funny in almost all walks of life, but as a junior in high school, in a room full of guys playing pool, fart plays.
All right. I'm going to bring this back to running here. All right. Sorry if you had to that gross you out, folks, but that's where we've become. I'm going to tell you about my freshman year of high school.
Okay.
These are the learning years, I realize, as we go back to a lot of these. I think there's some recently in adult years too, but more of these happen. Your first handful of years running, especially running competitively. And this was not anything I thought I did wrong at the time or whatever it was, but I was a standout freshman on our team. We had went to state and cross country. I was one of our scorers. I was our first through third runner the whole year on a state qualifying cross country team. It was a big deal, Division I. I was a contributor right out of the gates. So the coaches had a lot of faith in me, and freshman year of indoor track, our indoor conference 4x8, they decide to put 3 juniors and seniors on the team and me in our conference 4x8. And the conference 4x8 is a big deal. Like, that's an event you want to win as a team to show your collective. You recall that? Like the 4x8 was an event that really showed your squad off, right? And it usually happened, 4x8 was early usually in the events, in the meets, I believe.
First.
Anyways, not only
kicked off the meet.
Yeah, it was one of the first.
Yep.
Yeah. And we didn't run many indoor races. In fact, I think we opened our season with indoor conference or something ridiculous like that because we just didn't have access to many indoor meets or facilities where I lived. Anyways, not only did coach stick me on the 4x8, he stuck me as the anchor on the 4x8, comprised of our state championship cross-country guys, 4 out of the 5 top guys, me being one of them, thinking, DeWindt will figure it out, right? I always figured it out. Well, on this day, I did not figure it out. It was my first lashing from a coach I'd ever had. He was the head track coach. He knew my promise, but I never dealt with him in cross country. And this is the opening meet of my freshman year at track. So I've never dealt with this guy before, right? Don't know him. He wasn't the distance coach. He was the head track coach. And the 3 legs go before me, and I get the baton in first. They did their job. I got, as a freshman in my first track meet at the conference meet, which feels so big, I get the baton in first place in the 4x8 with the lead. So grab it, and I'm scared out of my mind. And I start ripping. This is a 166-meter track, so I don't even know what that equates to. How many laps it was. It was a many-lapped, right? The handoffs all become goofy. You know how it goes. I start to hear footsteps behind me as I'm running all out. And I didn't have a speed arrow in my quiver. I developed that as I got older. I had the endurance arrow, but for me, it worked the other way. Like I couldn't sustain high output like in the 8 or the 400 until I got older and developed. I was very undeveloped. Anyways, get the baton. I'm running so hard, so hard, so hard. Teammates are screaming at me. Coaches are screaming at me. This is the level of intensity I hadn't really been used to feeling in that enclosed indoor track environment. And after, let's say, 400 meters, I can just hear, there was a whole pack of guys behind me. And I couldn't help myself. And it's the first time I ever did this. I look back to see where they are. Never looked back in a race. It was never anything I thought about. And I'm like, oh, crap. There they are. I don't think I've looked back in a race since this day of any variety ever. I'm so scarred. So now I'm running and we got like a lap and a half left and I'm already tying up and I can't help it. I'm so desperate to win for the team. I look back again for a second time. And as they inch closer, my frequency of looking back just goes up. And pretty soon my head is just back looking as they're slowly catching me back. I'm trying to figure out if I can hold on or not. And in the final straightaway, which is only like 40 meters long on this track, I get passed by 2 teams in the final straightaway. Look back in the final straightaway, basically as they're passing me. We come in 3rd place. I ran like a 2:07. As a freshman, I guess that's where I was at. I ran hard. Not good enough. Not only did I feel like I let my team down, the head track coach comes over and used a 4-letter explicit saying, DeWindt, what in the did you do out there? Are you effing kidding me? Looking back like that, da-da-da. I got so chewed out by this coach, who I barely knew. He was basically a stranger to me, in front of the team who I let down in my eyes. Never again. It's one of the most horrifying experiences from an athlete-coach relationship. And the funny thing about it is I loved the guy moving forward. In fact, he was one of my favorite teachers of all time. He taught math. He made math fun. Eventually, I liked the guy. Like, really liked the guy. Didn't know his personality. In fact, it would have come off differently if I had been a year down the road and knew him. Kind of who he is. It was just, anyways. I got so chewed out that day. I have look back PTSD. If you ever catch me looking back in a race, it's not me. I will not. From that day forward, I will never shoulder check. I got the living heck scolded out of me. And that's a terrifying moment as a 14-year-old boy who lost the race and then gets that.
Well, yeah, because you're already embarrassed, ashamed, and in a lot of pain. But if you don't get that at home, most people don't get reamed out as adolescents in life. Most adults don't get screamed at. You see it happen in normal life and people are kind of shell-shocked. Like, not a lot of people have that type of confrontation happen. So to have it from a semi-stranger who's in a position of power, but the worst part is in front of everyone, public spectacle, that's traumatic.
It was right after the race. He came up. We were all still breathing hard. Yeah, and it was brief. I bet you it lasted 5 seconds. It wasn't like he sat there and crossed his arms and gave a speech. It was 5 seconds. People talk about how little conversations can change the trajectory of their athletic life, right? In a bad way or maybe a good way. It was just 5 seconds of what the heck was that? What the F were you thinking? Don't ever do that again. That's why you lost. That's why they caught you. Done. 5 seconds of that. I think I went and found my own space and a silent, sad tear came down in alone time. But yeah, that was a bad day. It taught me something. It could have been approached a little differently. And Mr. Fick, bless his heart, I love the guy. He was great. Just a little rough around the edges. Found that out. You ever have any moments where you get yelled at by a coach like that?
Yeah, I've had my share of coaches like that. I never had like both at the same time. Like, I got chewed out from a distance, or I got like up in your face, intense talk without screaming. But I had a few. And I was super, I don't know what you would call it. I don't know if it's passive aggressive or antagonistic or what, but when coaches got on me like that, I drove them crazy. I didn't take it well, and I would do something during the conversation to try to completely erode what they were doing. So it generally led to more yelling. But I am
So
a look
you
backer when I run.
to this day?
To this day. Yeah, I think that the only merit to don't waste energy looking back is when you're in all out, there's nothing left. Looking back's only going to be bad for me. But like it's 300 to go in cross country, like you should be going all out anyway. If you have
Right.
to look back to get motivated, like it's only going to slow you. But yeah, I like to have the radar set on scan. I want to know where everyone is at all times. I don't want to get tripped up. I don't want to get taken by surprise. I think it's because I'm a kicker. Historically in track and cross, I was a sit and kick, and I made my bread and butter was picking off surprised people. So yeah, I'm all for looking around right up until it's time to not look around anymore. And generally it's home stretch. But even then, like you got to know, am I leaving space on the rail or not? Do I shut the door? Do I drift? I'm okay with people looking a little bit. But what you described was probably not helpful.
Being in the lead, I do not think anybody should look back. I don't think at any point. I think it is if you're running fast and it's rhythmic. Now, in a cross-country race, when you round a corner, sure, quick glance to the left because the course cuts back into itself. In OCR, sure, the course is, but on like a straight line road without a 90-degree turn or on the track.
I'm checking.
He was right. I mean, I was, when there's a look back and then there's a look back where you take your shoulders with you when you look back, right? There's the quick corner of your eye and then there's a look back where your torso moves. Mm-hmm. That's not okay.
Yeah.
That's the look
back.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Well, I'm going to go. Yeah.
No, I was just going to kick it to you. Say, I just went. Now it's your turn.
Well, you kind of jogged a memory for me. This is not one I've ever told publicly. I don't believe. But it's your confrontation during a run, so to speak. So this was probably like I've had painful runs. I've had terrible runs. This was the worst situation I've ever been in during a run. And I believe I told you this one when we were out to dinner one time, just you and I. But when Hobie Call put on a race called Extreme Nation down in Zephyr Hills, Florida. And it was just outside Tampa, if I'm remembering this correctly, because this is years ago now. But this is when I was still just struggling to make it as a runner. I wasn't teaching anymore. So I was penny pinching everything I could to try to keep my travel stipend money. So I, at the time, was just getting whatever the cheapest motel I could find was. That's what I stay in before a race. And so I got into a pretty rough area of Tampa, Florida, and checked in a little later than I'd wanted to because my flight had been delayed. And it was probably like 8:00 at night. This was probably January or February. So sun doesn't stay up late that time of year. And my plan was checked online. There's a pizza place about a quarter mile from my hotel. So I was going to go for my shakeout run, finish at the pizza place, grab a pizza, walk it back home to the hotel, and then eat, go to sleep, get the most sleep I could. But it was raining and the hotel was not nice and I didn't trust the hotel. So I took my ID, I took my debit and credit card. I took the rental car key, hotel key. I put it all inside a little Ziploc bag. And then maybe I didn't take the car key. Maybe I put that somewhere else. But I had all like my money and ID with me. Put it in a Ziploc bag and then used my iPod Shuffle, it would have been, right? With the clip on it.
Mm-hmm.
I used that and clipped it. I clipped it to the inside of my long sleeve running shirt because it was raining. So I wanted everything on the inside there. And went for a run. And at the time, I didn't use headphones when I would run, especially alone in a city. But I had I didn't have any pockets on me on my running gear. So the only way to keep my stuff on me was to clip it using the iPod. So I'm like, whatever, I have it. I'm going to put headphones on and run. And this was the day before Bluetooth, so it was wired. So it was real obvious I had headphones on. And I went out for like a 3 or 4 mile run and I get about to the farthest away point before turning back in and I'm waiting for a red light. It's dark, I'm not really paying attention. And 3 individuals approach me and started talking to me. and I couldn't hear them. So I took the headphones out. I said, "I'm sorry, what'd you say?" And they're like, "Let me get that iPod." What? They're like, "Let me get that iPod." I'm like, no. And I didn't realize what was going on. I was in the middle of a run, listening to music, thinking about the race the next day, and I didn't realize that I was being robbed or jumped. So I just didn't really grasp it. And then all three stepped forward at the same time and suddenly looked menacing. Suddenly, like that situation energy changed from confusion to, oh, this is what's happening. And so to buy time, I just started backing up a little bit, and I had one headphone in, so just kind of like fumbling with it, pretending I couldn't hear them, deciding what was going to happen here. And I had all the things that I needed to travel with on me. All my money was on me, and I think the hotel scan card was on me. So like everything I had was there. I could not afford to get robbed. And Macaulay and I had spent years of our life running in Milwaukee together at night. We did a lot of after basketball practice, baseball practice, whatever, night runs together. And so we would always, as you do on runs, just start talking about random things, but it would often come back to, what would we do if we ever get into a bad situation on a run? Do you guys ever, as teammates, do that little daydreaming, plan out what you're going to do if you ever get attacked on a run?
Not that it stands out anyways.
Okay. Maybe it's just because we were in a more of a city running based area growing up, but we ran through a lot of areas that weren't terrible, but weren't great. And so we had a plan of what we thought we were going to do. And we had rehashed it many, many times. And I decided, all right, we're going to do this. So pretended like I didn't understand them, finally took it off, and I backed up, was just going to run. And I backed up into like a sign, like by a bus stop, how they have like large signs there. I backed up to that, and now they were right in front of me, and I didn't have an exit anymore. So I did the thing that we were going to say if we ever were in this situation. We were just going to look over their shoulder and say something about a police car behind them. I was like, well, that's a bad decision with a police car there. And I got lucky. It worked. All three turned and looked the other direction, all at the same time. But they were still too close. I didn't have a running lane past them. And so I moved into step 2 of it, which was act first. And the closest one to me turned sideways. I hit as hard as I could possibly hit, directly in the side of the jaw. Sucker punch, no warning, a complete cheap shot, as hard of an overhand right fastball as I could throw. I threw that at him, and immediately turned and pivoted and hit the second guy as hard as I could, right as he started to turn to hear what that was. And so I got 2 free cheap shots in before they really understood that the situation was changing. And then the third guy, who was just out of reach, reached into his jacket. And I don't know what he was reaching for, but I suddenly realized, like, we didn't cover this in our pregame scenario here. And so I stepped forward and threw one of those like triumphant Leonidas 300 push kicks at him. Like, I'm going to snap his wrist with this kind of thing. And it was just like, he was just out of reach. It was this like lazy, weak little like tap of his wrist. But it just like, it slowed him up just enough that I followed through on that and hit him as hard as I could in the face, and then turned and ran serpentine, not knowing, was he reaching for a knife? Was he reaching for a gun? Was he about to pull out, like, I don't know, money and give it to me, saying, hey, sorry, we shouldn't have done it. I didn't know what he was reaching for. It probably wasn't money, but assuming that there would be shots coming, I ran as hard as I could in a zigzag pattern. And I am fairly certain that I probably PR'd my next 200 meters right there. I probably have never run a faster 200 in my life, and just ran on pure adrenaline until I was completely shot, and then stumbled my way back to the hotel.
That's intense. Know what the best part of this story is for me? It's just a pale guy in split shorts throwing sucker punches. The least, I assume you're wearing split shorts.
I had half tights
The
on.
least in. Oh yeah, okay. It's even, for some reason, that makes it better. But like, just envisioning like the least suspecting human that's ever going to put up a fight.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine they went back and told their friends about a guy in tights punched him in the face. Like, I can't
No, and I
imagine
was like,
that's something that.
I was a weird kind of shook afterwards where I had probably more chemicals in my body than I ever have my entire life. Like everything got released all at once. And I was like shaky and wired. And then I just crashed hard later and fell asleep really soundly. But then later on, when I told my brother about it and we laughed about it, we were joking like, what was that story when they got back to the house? Like, did they sit up after a while and be like, listen, no, not a word about what happened here today, boys.
It's just that's taking an intense situation and you chose to escalate it, which is never a good approach unless it works.
Yeah.
If that didn't work in your favor, that goes real bad because then you lose all your stuff, and end up in the hospital.
And they messed me up, yeah. It's just it's one of those things where you hear so many stories of someone hands over their wallet and still gets stabbed or still get shot. And there's no way of knowing in the moment which one it's about to be. And we had decided in the middle of a run when you're feeling good and confident and no one's around that we were going to err on the side of not being the victim. And my uncles are cops. And my dad told them afterwards and they're like, that was really, really stupid. Like you should have just given them it and just tried to get out of there. But it wasn't smart. I got extremely lucky. I understand that. But it was like one of those reinforcing moments of the power of preparation. Like we had our mental reps in. We had a heavy bag. We had mitts. We had headgear. We had gloves. We had been sparring for long enough. We'd done enough heavy bag work. He and I boxed each other enough. Like I knew how to throw a punch. I knew how to slip a punch. I knew how hard it was to evade one if you're not prepared for it. And as an athlete, I think you're always cocky enough that you can survive any situation. And I would never want to be in that situation ever again. I was extremely lucky that I came home to Lisa and we had just Braden at the time. But it went from really bad to everything was okay really quickly, and I was lucky. But the second one went after I hit the first guy with my right hand. He was on my left side, kind of diagonal. And as I turned to the guy on my right, I used my left hand and he moved forward a little bit and I missed a little bit and I caught him on the jaw still, but his tooth just ripped open my pinky knuckle. And I had an obstacle course race the next day. And I'm back in the hotel and my left hand, my left two knuckles are like 3 times the size of all the other knuckles and it's bleeding. And so like all night I was waking up to ice my hand and then do mobility with it and then ice my hand and trying to bring the swelling down, but keep it functional. And the next day I was like, I'm about to do a short course OCR race and my hand is compromised. So it didn't end up costing me. Hunter smashed me that day. I took second, but I got lucky is what I'm saying.
2 questions. Well, one statement and a question. This is Hobie Call's race. Did he not race?
No, he partnered with a motocross company to put on his vision of what short course OCR could be for the masses. So he didn't race.
Okay. And then 2, there's going to be somebody that is listening to this right now and they're going to get jumped at some point in their life. It's inevitable. One of these listeners, and they're going to think of the cops behind you comment, which is actually brilliant. Never even thought about that. Well, you can, but that cop there is not going to like it. I mean, if I put myself in a robber's shoe, it would work on me too. It would be a half a second, but just enough
blip,
to make
right?
a move.
Yeah.
And that's actually
and the plan was run away when they turned, but I didn't have room.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you're very tough. And
I didn't have
brave.
to be tough. I didn't get hit.
And very alive and still owned that iPod shuffle. This reminds me of a run not long ago. This isn't going to be a story. It's going to be 30 seconds, but I was running down a residential area on a recovery run. This is suburban Minneapolis, a good neighborhood, we'll call it. Wide streets, big sidewalks, green grass, people who take care of their yards, that sort of thing. And I'm running. It's a 25 mile an hour residential street. And this guy must come down at 70, I'm going to say. 70 would be my best guess as to how fast he was going. Big SUV, like an Escalade or a big Tahoe or Suburban. New, nice vehicle. and there was a mom pushing a stroller just in front of me around a corner. There was somebody else outside, like watering their grass. It was the middle of a weekday. And I'm running and I come to an intersection. This car is coming behind me. I have my headphones on listening to who knows what. And he turns in front of me like in a squeal right as I hit the intersection. And going so like unreasonably fast for whatever the heck's going on. And he cut it so close to me that I smacked his car with my hand. Smacked it hard. I was pissed. Not only that, but there was a woman pushing a baby who I happened to almost be caught up to, who just had rounded the corner. And it's like, this person could have easily, 1, killed me, 2, hit a woman with her baby in a stroller. And it just hit me wrong. And I smacked the back. I caught the back panel of his whatever hard. Anyways, as soon as that happens, the guy whips, hard cranks left through the person's yard. This is a corner intersection, a corner lot house. Whips. Yep. When he whips, he almost hits this woman and her baby. She's on the sidewalk. She's just out of reach now. Whips, goes through the yard, comes back, gets out of his truck, and just starts running at me. Like, are you, just everything. And I didn't move a muscle. I didn't back up. In fact, I walked towards him, and I screamed even louder and crazier than he was. I literally out-crazied the guy. The woman in the stroller starts running down the street. I remember vividly. She just starts bolting. The woman out watering her grass runs inside thinking like shit's going to go down. And I didn't, in the moment, all I knew was to act crazier and scare this guy more than he was scaring me. I already hit his truck. He thinks I'm nuts. I had my shirt off. It was summer, feeling good about my physique, right? The guy stopped. He completely stopped. I literally got a look in my eyes, the same thing that you're talking about, in which I don't know what came over me, but I know that I wouldn't want to mess with me. And I backed him down, and I just doubled down on yelling at him and telling him what a POS he is. And are you kidding me? You could have killed somebody and da. And he left marks through that person's yard, tore up their grass. But you just got to out crazy. I've decided in an intense moment like that, you just got to act crazier than they are. I don't care how crazy they are. You just out crazy them. They're yelling, good, yell louder. They're intense, great, level it up even more. And there's a good chance that works. And it worked in my situation. Something came out of me. I don't even, the tone and pitch and bass out of my voice and being was something that I never knew was in me. And so I guess what I'm saying is maybe being the aggressor makes sense sometimes. Because that was my instinct to do the same thing instead of try to I escalated the situation and scared him. And he was a guy in a business suit, like all dressed to the nines, hair slicked to the side, a 40-something, a little older than me, well built, not like a chubby guy or a small frame guy. Like I scared him with my bite or my bark. Scared that guy. Anyways, that's the only close encounter I've had like that.
Those are tough because it's too often people just get shot randomly. It's like, the logical move isn't always the logical move because there's just too many unstable people out there. You got lucky. I got lucky. It's not my MO moving forward. Like, seek it out is not.
And
my
let's be
MO.
honest,
There's just too many crazy people.
We're average height and build adult male men, right? We're not most people who probably are listening to this. So it's a very different, try the cops move. No matter who you are first, I think is
running's always
we're in a
option.
very different position. Yeah. I don't know if that counts as one of my stories. I got another one in the chamber, but if you got something,
go for it. Go for it.
Well, I'm going to bring this back to OCR. And I've told this story in the podcast once. Again, this is so long ago. In fact, it was about, I think, Get to Know Your Hosts episode we did years ago. I think I told this story on it. But how'd you find OCR? Well, this was my first Spartan race back in 2016. My very first one. And for those of you who listened for a while, I think, how old was that? 2016. Was I 34 when I found the sport, let's say? 33, right. 34. Anyways, watched the Spartan Race World Champs on TV on Christmas Day. For whatever reason, that's when they played it back in the day. Saw Robert Killian win, was inspired, said, I want to do that, got obsessed, followed all the pros on social media, all the stuff, watched as many YouTube videos as I could, soaked it all up. And finally, my first race was here. And these were days in which I post on social media a ton. Every day. I was like one of those guys. Anyways, I made it like, my goal is to qualify for the Spartan Race World Championships, and I'm going to go do this thing. And so I built it up, not only for myself, but like got some investment from people. So it felt like it mattered. Mm-hmm. So the coin was the idea. So I went down to Chicago to earn my first coin and go try my first Spartan race. The goal to go to the Spartan Race World Champs. And so it was a race in which you weren't there, actually, which is interesting. I think you may have been living in Colorado at the time. I don't know, but you did not run this race. I don't know why. You were there. In fact, that's the first time I saw you. You stood in place for Robert Killian on the podium that day. It was a Sunday sprint. That's what I remember. You know why you didn't race that day?
I don't remember. Unless this was the start of my injury train. And I think I was coming off the broken toe at that point. We'd have to check the timeline on that, but that would be my guess. It was either toe, Achilles, or toe or Achilles. Those were the first two things that kicked off all the nonsense.
Okay, well, Robert Killian was there. Ryan Kent, I think he ran the day before, but didn't race Sunday. Doesn't matter. I was only there for the Sunday sprint while everybody was tired. Mike Ferguson, Robert Killian, Brian Gawiski, Garrett Tolley and Kasky, Jordan Buscemi, that crew, which I didn't know any of them at the time. But anyways, and Robert Killian had just come off the hurricane heat. He had won the Super the day before, did the 12-hour overnight hurricane heat. We had to delay the start of the elite race by 5 minutes because he had to still get there from whatever last thing they had him doing. He toes the line looking like absolute dog pile. Like he had been working who knows how long.
Kirk, I ran
and
with
he
him
wins, by the way,
from his car to the start line. I had done what I could to help him transition that day from hurricane heat out. He didn't really need much. He's pretty dialed with that thing. And running with him from the car to the start line, I was worried for that man. He looked awful. Just like that 300-meter run from parking lot to start line.
He looked exhausted, as he should have been. He's been up for how long? He ran a race the day before, then does a 12-hour hurt. Anyways, he's right next to me. He lined up right next to me. And I'm like, oh, my God, that's the world champ, Robert Killian. That's the guy. That's the guy. Oh, my God, I'm among celebrities and stars here. Point of this is my first race, built it up in my mind. And we start running. They're tired. I could tell they're tired. I could tell, like, I'm right in the front with these guys. I'm second place behind Killian, running in front of. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do this thing. I'm running well. We're in mud up to our crotch. It was one of those wet years at the Hunt Club. If anybody's been to the Chicago venue, you can get gross. Long story short, I'm running so hard. And eventually, Mike Ferguson and Brian Gawiski start pulling away from me in the swamp, the back half of this sprint, which was like a 5-mile sprint at the time. It was 5 and change. So now I'm in 4th place, whatever. I know top 5 get their coin, and whatever. Anyways, so now it gets tight in the swamp, and we're going through muck. I'm literally, it's one of those where you got to pull your legs out of some spots because this isn't running. I thought Spartan race, I'd at least be running, and here I am creature crawling at points. Like, okay, this is way worse and way more challenging than I expected, which most experience in their first Spartan race. Anyways, it gets tight in the swamp, so now I can't see these guys. And I just round a corner, there's a table there with some volunteers. I don't think much of it. I continue to run. They're screaming something at me. I think they're telling me, great job, you're awesome, man, or something, but I don't know. I'm in race mode, right? Out in one ear, out the other. So I run, work my butt off, get to the finish line. I will interject with saying, I get to the next obstacle, which is the rope climb, and they say, what's your name? What's your name? And I was like, oh, I'm doing awesome. They had video crews there to film Robert Killian that day. And so they were filming the race. They were on it. Like they were doing something important for their media. So it felt like a big deal. And I'm like, Kirk DeWindt. Remember that name, Kirk DeWindt. Then I get to like the next thing, which is, I don't know, some tire flip. Like, what's your name? And I'm like, Kirk DeWindt. I'm Kirk DeWindt. And I'm thinking, I'm like, awesome, right? Oh, this all makes sense here in a second. And I think I've told you this story before, so you know it. So I work my butt off. I cross the finish line in 4th, exhausted. not a bad time gap within, I don't know, handfuls of seconds of Mike and Brian Gawiski, and maybe a minute behind Killian or whatever. And I get to the start line and they ask me again, what's my name? Or no, I get to the finish line, cross, commiserating with the guys, and Lee Earl Rugland, if you remember Lee Earl Rugland, one of the OGs.
Stud.
We're bullshitting in the stud, bullshitting in the finishing corral. And he goes, good job, man. You, who are you? What's, he's very friendly. He's like, any burpees today? And I'm like, nope, no burpees today. Ran it, did the thing. And I'm like, what about you? And he goes, no, well, 5. And I was like, 5? You did 5 burpees? Like, why did you do 5 burpees? He goes, well, the Atlas Stone. And I say, what Atlas Stone? What do you mean 5 burpees? He goes, what do you mean? I was like, what do you mean 5 burpees? He's like, what do you mean you didn't do burpees? And in that very moment, I understood why they yelled at me at that table. I thought they were cheering me on. They were telling me to come back. At every one of the obstacles, they were trying to figure out what was the guy that cheated, that just ran right by the Atlas Stone. And in that very moment, I realized what I did without even knowing it. I was in such lights out mode. I ran right by the Atlas Stone. It didn't exist for some reason. I didn't acknowledge the big balls, concrete balls and flags over there. Just like, screw it. And then about 30 seconds later, an official came up to me and said, what is your name? I said, it's Kirk DeWindt. He goes, you're disqualified because you skipped an obstacle. And that's it. And in that moment, we know how we build these things up as huge deals. And Killian's there, and these guys are there that I would want to kind of impress at the time, and thinking I'm going to stick my nose in there. I felt like biggest jack butt in the world. I felt like such an idiot and so demoralized over that. Built it up in my mind, showed up at my first Spartan race, and was never even on the results. Not at all. And then I had to sit there and watch everybody get their coins and stand on the podium. I saw you. Didn't say anything, I don't believe. I felt like such a poser. My first Spartan race, for sure. And it was a big deal. I'd never traveled for a race after college. I'd never, to drive down. Like, most people don't do that in normal life. In our culture, it's normal to get it on a plane and go fly and race. In normal people culture, in normal running culture, like you live in a big city, no, you just drive to the start line of the next flat road half marathon. You race, you come home. So for me to go down, get a hotel, it was a big deal. Frickin' DQ'd my first race. I had nothing but humbling experiences my first year. Yeah. Nothing but humbling experiences. I didn't land on one podium. Failed 4 things in one race. Had to go to Tahoe and get my teeth kicked in. But I came back because I was hungry. But anyways, that was my first Spartan race experience. Was a DNF or a DQ, so to speak. Idiot.
That's a tough. I should have been DQ'd in my first one as well, but they didn't have a rule book back then. I got away with it.
The over/under through. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell that story real quick. I enjoy that one. Then you can tell your next story. But I enjoy that story.
The very first race I ever went to was 2011. Spartan was very young. I don't think there was a full rule book yet, more just a set of guidelines. And the first obstacle of the day was the over/under through. Now, the way this currently looks like, there is a 4-foot wall that touches the ground to go over. And then there's a 4-foot wall that is elevated about a foot off the ground that you clearly go under. And then there is about a 5-foot wall with a hole cut out up near the top for you to go through. Well, back in the day, they basically just had sawhorses. Just a wooden beam with 2 support legs into the ground, and everything was painted black. And the over, you just went over it. And the under, you just went under it. And there wasn't a through yet. I think it was just over, under, over, under. That's how the race started. And the only difference between the over and the under was that there was a black painted tarp connected to the top of the sawhorse that was draped onto the ground. And so we do the over, and I'm like, oh, that was easy. A lot of these people kind of struggled over that 4-foot thing. I've steeplechased. I'm an athlete. I'm good. I passed a couple people. And then 20 feet later, they're getting down onto the ground to go under the next one, and with that tarp there. And to me, it just looked like it was just a backing to it. Like there was just a tarp hanging down from it. I didn't understand what it was. And I thought, look at these unathletic runners. They're already too tired from the first one. They decided they're going to crawl under this. I'm going over again. So I did that. And then over the third, and then the final under, I go to hurdle again, and the volunteer's yelling at me. He's like, you failed. You failed. What do you mean I failed? I'm in first place. Because Hobie's back there going under the second under as I've cleared 2 unders much faster. And he's like, no, that is the under. You have to go under it. That is a failure. Like, what does that mean? He's like, you have to do 30 burpees. Like, what is a burpee? He's like, you have to get down on the ground, do a push-up, and then stand up and jump in the air, and that's one. Like, I have to do 30 of those? I didn't fail it. I just didn't know what it was. He's like, I'm sorry, you got it. I said, what if I do 10 burpees and redo it? He's like, yeah, it sounds good to me. So I did 10 quick burpees, and then I ducked underneath the under, and then I took off running. I was in last place by like 50 yards by this point. We were only 200 meters into the race. I'd just been sitting there talking with this guy, trying to figure out what was going to happen here. So I came up 20 burpees shy of the quota and negotiated a retry, but I only retried the last one. I didn't do the first under as well. So that's a DQ.
Didn't sound like they went to video replay for that one or the burpee technique, or I think you're all right. You're in the negotiation.
That was not
days.
a thing. That was not a thing yet. That
Don't
was my
you
intro
wish
to
we
the
go
sport.
back to that day? Those days, it was almost better then. Was it better then?
No, it wasn't
You don't
better.
think
then.
so?
Looking back, the courses were arguably better. They found if nasty, technical, demanding terrain was your thing, the courses might have been better. But looking back, the obstacles were a joke. We had that day a bucket carry and a tire carry. There's a random assortment of what looked like SUV tires, but they were not all the same sizes. You had to take it up and down a ravine or two and bring it back. We were just getting to the top, chucking it, letting it roll down the hill, pick it up at the bottom, run up the next one. They weren't challenging. There was no sense of rule book or what should or shouldn't be done. You're just following what the person ahead of you did, because most people had never done one. There was a monkey bar, and I think that was it for hanging obstacles. I don't even know if there was a rig in my first 2 Spartan races that I did. Not until I got to World Championships did I see anything that resembled a rig. It was a very, very, very watered down race. Just no one had ever done anything like that before. In the terrain, they made up for it with gnarly, challenging footing conditions. But now we don't want to go back to that. But there's a middle ground in there that was pretty awesome. But yeah, so I failed the first obstacle I ever did. Very first obstacle in my first race.
Well, I guess we're not too far apart there. Really. But you actually got on the results, and I think you ended up second still.
Yeah.
So the one thing I miss about the older races, and I don't know if I'll ever run an OCR again competitively or not. I haven't decided. If the right carrot is dangled, there's a chance, But is just the unreasonable, and that is a word I'm using on purpose, the unreasonable carries at some of the events. The ones in which literally change your DNA and you question if you can even complete it. Mm-hmm. Now it's you go sprint with the sandbag for 45 seconds and plop it back down. Yes, some of the mountain carries can be difficult, but now it might be a single at Palmerton instead of a double, or it might be the ones where you had to put 120 pounds on your back and go up a double black diamond for well over a quarter mile, and it may take you 17 minutes. The ones where they're actually trying to hurt you. I miss the days of forced suffering, and I think the masses need that. I think people who are dialed can find a way to do that on any course. You could run a 400 and find the right way to do that. But I think for people who want the experience or aren't as good as finding the dark side, like, oh, I saw the light, those things are what I miss the most, is the ones that make you question, like, can I even? And those were, every season we got a couple of those in the past. And I kind of miss, your grip would go out on you on a bucket carry because it had 70 pounds of crap in it and you had no other option. And those things that actually, it ruined me, broke me down, made me question how good am I. Loved that. I haven't had to have that at any of the recent years. Yeah. That's what I miss. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a different goal of it back then. But you talked about embarrassing first race. I'm going to say my most embarrassing, and I've talked about it to some extent on here before, but I had 3 most embarrassing races in my life. First was that triathlon. That was embarrassing. Technically the first was my sophomore year of college, sophomore or junior? I don't remember. Whenever I met Lisa, we were talking, but she still had
You
a
better
boyfriend.
remember that.
Well, I
You
transferred
better
3
remember what year that
times
was.
and I took 5 years to get through college. So I think I was technically a junior.
Okay.
Doesn't really matter. I think I was a junior. Anyway, we had started talking and spending time together, but it was still like that flirty platonic, and she was still seeing her ex-boyfriend. And she came to the track meet because she lived with the track girls and also partially to watch me race. And she brought him. And I was running the mile that day. It was my first indoor home meet. It was my second indoor collegiate race. And because I'd taken the previous year to try to play baseball. And I was running my first collegiate mile, and I thought I was in shape to run 4:19. And so I went out on 4:19 pace right from the gun. And I made it indoor 8 laps to the mile. I made it 5 laps and got dropped by the pack. And I closed with, I want to say I closed with a 76-second last quarter mile, which is 5:04 pace. So I went from 4:19 pace through the half to, I think I ran 4:36 by the end, which is slower than I ran in high school my senior year. And I fell apart, cratered, and took last place. And I was in last with a lap and a half to go. So I had to run past her 2 more times with her boyfriend next to her. And I can see that he's kind of laughing at this kid struggling, the kid who his girlfriend was kind of cheering for. And I was just so embarrassed. I thought, I'm going to run sub 4:20. I'm going to impress her. I'm going to be our fastest on our team today. And I just cratered and suffered. And it took like 90 seconds to run the last lap and a half or whatever it was. And it felt like 90 years. I was just so ashamed to do that in front of the girl that I really, really liked.
Was that like, was that a period in which like she was forefront, like the, other than racing well for you, like the next thought was like, I want to impress this girl? Like, was it that high on your priority list at that time?
They're probably even. Yeah.
Okay. So it was, that
Like
was the
I
center
saw
of,
her
like,
out of the corner of my eye every lap. And you know how you get dialed
okay.
in during a track race, you don't
Yeah.
see much at all. Like I was probably too aware of her. But yeah, that was, anyways, that was the second worst. But the most embarrassing race I ever had was at Obstacle Course World OCR World Championships, the inaugural year down in Oregonia, Ohio at King's Domain. And it was the first year they had it. John Albin came over. Ryan Atkins was there. I don't know if it was Hobie or I think it was Hobie that year. And I believed I could make the podium there. I had taken third at Spartan World Championships 2 years prior. I had DNF'd with cramps the year after, but this was not going to be mountain. This was Midwest nasty terrain. And it was going to be 10 to 11 miles rather than that 16 or 17 in the mountains of Spartan. And I thought, this is my chance. There's thousands of dollars on the line. I'm really, really fit. And I went after it. One of the McDougals, I think it was Jordan McDougall, had his USA singlet on. He let out. Albin, Atkins, myself, and Hobie ran behind him. I think Ryan Woods might have been there that year. I don't remember for sure. There were some good Canadians there, but we whittled down to 5 of us and then 4 of us. And then those 3 separated from me a few miles in. And I ran in no man's land in 4th the entire race. And I worked really hard because I knew there's an obstacle gauntlet at the end. And I didn't know John Albin or Atkins, how they would react to this. And it was technical enough. I thought someone might roll an ankle or fail an obstacle. So I just held out hope. And I raced hard all the way through. And I was in 4th with 2 obstacles to go. One was called Tip of the Spear. It was basically an A-frame. I mean, what's it called? Olympus, but with just chains and no footholds on it. And you had to go across 3 boards of that. And then you just ran up over a wall and finished. And I fell off of it. And then I fell off of it. And I had my grip pumped. And then 4th place came in. And then 5th place came in. And then I just gave up my band and walked off the course 50 meters from the finish line because I didn't want to be listed under the finishers without a band. And I didn't want to be seen listed in 6th place or 5th place. I wanted 3rd. I was going to accept 4th, first person that was not one of those 3 people. And just out of pure ego, I quit. Gave them my band and walked off with an attitude, and then told anyone who would listen how it was a stupid course, how the obstacles were not what OCR should be, how there's way too much emphasis on technical grip work, that's not a test of engine. It's not where this sport should be going. It's bad course design, stupid rules. Like that. And I'd like to think that's out of character for me. Typically, like people who listen to Race Brain might think it's not that out of character for me to complain about courses or officials or rule books or decisions or organizations. But generally I try to do it in a way that at least there's some takeaway for how things can be improved. This was just me ranting and being a pissy little brat. And by that night, I was so ashamed of myself. And then I started taking heat in all the online OCR groups. And deservedly so. And I had nothing I could say about it. But I did. I wrote a reply like explaining that some people heard me wrong and that what I really meant was this. And it didn't ring true to myself. And I didn't like it. And then the next morning I had to walk with my tail between my legs back to Brett Stewart and Adrian and apologize to them and explain why I said what I said to people. And basically just like grovel at their feet and be like, I'm sorry. I swear I'm not an ass typically, at least not to this level. You're doing a great job. I said a lot of things and I shouldn't. It was just like I was just a little low point for me as an athlete and a human combined in that moment. It was so embarrassing, and it doesn't just go away. Like we had a good conversation. They were really appropriate and very, they handled it with grace and they didn't have to. But it didn't end there because no one else was part of that conversation. So the online forums kept going and the threads kept going, and I didn't have a single thing I could say or should say to defend myself. So it was just like a couple of weeks of being dragged over the coals and deserving it. And I'm sure there's people out there that to this day, that was their only interaction with me. And that the only time seeing me at a race or the only time reading anything that had to do with me. And that was their one snapshot of who I am as a person. And I was just really, really embarrassed and ashamed of that entire thing. That was my low point of any race ever.
Yikes. What year was that?
First year, maybe 2015, 2014.
Yeah, that's one you wish you could take back, huh?
100%. Yep. Yeah, and it was all ego that started it. It was ego and shame. That was it. There's nothing else. And those are two things that you should not be prisoner to when you're past the age of understanding.
Yeah, but that was also, if that didn't happen, a period of growth that was probably necessary in one tiny little compartment of your life, right? That needed to happen. Because I've been there in many aspects in other ways, right? Where I do something or say something I'm not proud of. I do that quite a bit. Sometimes I put my foot in my mouth on here once in a while with my 4-letter words. But point being, when it sinks in, it's as long as you take it moving forward, you can chalk it up as you can put your rose tinted glasses on. Be like, I learned from this, and you did. You probably have never acted like that again, even in a compulsive manner, because now you know, right?
Well, it showed, yeah. And it was just like this slap in the face to me to how self-important I had become. And it wasn't that I was seeking to become self-important. It was that I was trying to race for my living and for my family's well-being. And I wasn't doing it well enough to be relaxed and comfortable in that life. Yeah. And I was getting desperate and it was coming out sideways. And I didn't think I was the man, but I was self-obsessed and self-absorbed to the point where I couldn't think about anything but my performance and what the optics on that performance were and what it would mean for me opportunity-wise moving forward. It was only about that. It was desperation of trying to make it, but it was coming out sideways. And it was a good wake-up call that there are bigger things. And if I can't be a good person doing this, like maybe it's time to reprioritize why and how I'm doing this.
How do I say this? Well, okay, first of all, you have a lot of testosterone running through your bloodstream. People don't know that about you. Now they do. You got more than the average person. That has been tested in labs to the point in which doctors are like, okay, you're juicing, right? And you're like, no, I'm not. I'm Right. So you got a lot of vigor and a lot of gusto in that body of yours. Second, and I think in recent years, because I've known you pretty well now. I mean, we've known each other well for 5 years, I would say.
Mhm.
The first 2 years, we weren't in each other's lives much. We interacted with each other, of course, but not like we know each other now. And I would say in recent years, you take bad days so much better than you did in your early years. Like if you had a bad performance in your early years, it really affected, like you were upset with yourself because you hold high expectations, right? And which is okay. And I think a moment when I've seen you learn from this, and you probably won't remember this, and I thought it was my first U.S. National Series race in 2017. In fact, you and I had run together with Mick Girillo and Mike Ferguson at Elm Creek like a month prior. You came up for a training weekend.
You guys smashed me.
Anyways, I think that's the first time I met you. I think that's the first time I met you in person. But you were just coming back from that horrible Dubai race or whatever it was, and you were all out of sorts or something. I forget what it was. Doesn't matter. Anyways, you fell off the final rig after having a really good race, I thought. You said you ran poorly.
Is that Seattle?
You fell off the final rig in Seattle. It was my first U.S. National Series race. I took 17th there, and I got waxed. 1 year later, I took 4th on that very same course, which was a big comeback for me in a U.S. National Series race. But you fell off, got into a burpee off, because I think Kent failed too. Somehow you knuckleheads failed it that day. I don't recall.
Yeah.
And the amount, I came in minutes after you guys did, and the amount of dissatisfaction, like you were visibly angry with yourself. But in that moment, you got your own space. I remember like you went off and you dealt with it on your own instead of whatever, subjecting. And I saw that again. You had a race you weren't happy with after Lambeau Field Stadium later that year. You lost to Robert Killian and Ryan Kent, and you weren't happy. And you sucked it up. But like you learned, like you just gathered yourself in private and then came back and put on a face. Like you were like, okay, you know what? And that'd be very different than like, that's like maturation in the sport. Okay, I can be mad at myself, but I can't let it affect how I am with other people. And I remember watching you walk back to your car after Seattle, and I just finished and was very disappointed in my own race and didn't know how to really express it. And I remember you being like, you got your own space. And something about me respects the fact, like, okay, if I need to gather myself, I could gather myself. But in recent years, I don't notice that with you anymore. It's like the torch has been passed to the point where like, yes, what I do matters, but like what others do matters almost more. Your athletes, your friends, right? And I think I'm to that phase too. And it's just an interesting like growth trajectory. I don't know. Maybe I'm over analyzing, but that's what I noticed. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. I don't know.
No, I appreciate that because it's had to be very intentional. And it's funny watching Braden. He is he's very much a mix of Lisa and I, but he, after failure or disappointment, is me. He took second this past weekend in his race to a very good racer, a kid who's I think took 6th at the Spring Nationals down in Carolina or Florida or something. I think North Carolina. So he was 10th behind this kid who was 6th in the nation this spring, and he kept his visor down, got out of the cart, and stomped right over to the car and sat in the truck. As all the other drivers are, because we have to pass post-race inspection and take parts off the engine, and they're inspecting it, and the kids are congratulating themselves. And someone had to come up to me and say, "Hey, could you find your driver? We're trying to do the podium picture." I was like, "Oh my goodness. This exact same thing happened to Lisa and my brother and my mom and dad over the years with me. Like I'm watching a miniature me." And now we're trying to go through the process of someone is always watching. Someone is always listening. Until you can do it, you've got to fake it first. And eventually, over time, you will become that person. If you act it long enough, you'll become that. But yeah, it's a painful process. You don't want to teach someone not to care, but you need to teach someone how to channel it.
The tough thing is that's a personality trait that many, let's say in quotes, winners, high achievers possess. Is the standard you hold for yourself performance wise. Whoever you damage along the way doesn't matter to some. However, whatever you need to run over to get there, whatever, like the standard for your own performance is so high that sometimes it's easy to have your own blinders on, right? To how you're actually being. I think you have to learn that as you mature, though. I don't think, like, if you're competitive and you have a high expectation for yourself and you don't perform, like, there's going to be adult temper tantrums, however they come out, and learning those and dealing with them. Yeah, I bet you that's very interesting to see that in your kid, because your kid is dialed. Braden is a calculated, dialed perfectionist, from what I've gathered. And so second place would be the pinnacle of some kid's karting career, and he storms off into his car.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the biggest takeaways as from being a parent so far is that we are who we are, and we are born that way. And then it takes work to be anything else. You can't teach that. You're either that person or you're not. And then you have to work on it one way. You have to teach someone who doesn't care to care. And someone who really cares, you have to teach them how to not hurt as badly. How to find silver linings, or how to just fake it for all. But people are born the way they're born. That nature versus nurture thing, nature is so powerful. And the best we can do is nurture them in the right direction. But yeah, just watching him do what I do, and to a T, the body language, the same feelings. When he finally talks about it afterwards, he's describing it using the same words I would use to describe my own. So it's I get like this little hit of almost not shame, but like this, like, oh, I did that to him. This is me.
Yeah.
This is me coming out.
Might
of
just
him
be
right
in his
now.
DNA.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to watch that play out. If you don't go broke in the process, karting's expensive, as we've chatted about off mic.
We will.
Yeah. All right, I have one more quick one. I know we got maybe, I don't know, 7 minutes or so, it looks like. Quick one that I don't know if people will notice this, but since we're talking about, this wasn't a racing thing, and now, I'll tell this one. So in 2018, I had what I call my breakout years in the U.S. National Series. I had taken a 4th, 5th, and 6th in the big races against, the Hobies and Codys and Ryans and Killians, and everybody was showing up. I think it was as dense as the field had been in that era, and I found my way. Anyways, had a great year, ended up with some stress fractures in my feet, and limped through Utah, took like 11th or 13th, and then couldn't do the North American champs or the world champs. I was bummed. Well, they were looking for commentators. You were running the ultra that day, I think, or something. You weren't racing either. You weren't available to commentate, which you had done in the past. It was myself, Amelia Boone, and Kevin Donahue was the team, along with Pat Parnell. They hired that year to commentate some of the U.S. National Series races, and he did a bang up job with Kevin playing color commentary, Pat being sort of like the main commentary. Anyways, I reached out to Joe DI and I said, hey, I'm not racing, but I have a TV background. Would love to help you out if I could. He said, great, let's have you come in for the team race, or for both days. Anyways, what's the name of the production company that used to do the events? You know this.
Was it Red something?
No, it doesn't even matter. But they hire a whole
Transition Productions.
A second Transition Productions. They hire a whole secondary production company. It's not in Spartan. They hired an outside source to do the filming, the ed, all that stuff. Right now, I think it's all in house. But anyways, through OCR Report, or however you want to look at that. Well, I show up and they say, yeah, Kirk, you're not commentating the World Championships. You're only on for the team race. And I was like, what? I came here to be like one of the commentators. I was excited about it. I was all studied up. I sent everybody questionnaires beforehand. I was ready. And they're like, well, you're here. Maybe we can use you anyways. Like, great, thanks. He's like, do you want to just do an intro piece at the start line before everybody's going? Top 5 contender women, top 5 contender men. And I was like, sure, I'll take that. And then maybe cut in on the course once or twice. And then I was going to be in the booth the next day, which went very well, in my opinion. We had a great time. I felt very good about how I did and how we all did together. But we get out there, the mics aren't connecting. The thing isn't, we're on the wrong channels. It's like, you got to go in 5 seconds, Kirk, and you're hearing all this in your ear, which none of you realize in these high-level productions. You have producers talking in your ear when your mic is live, when it's not. There's all this back-end noise that you never know exists. So they hand me a new headset, put me in there with the microphone. I'm going to talk about Rose Wetzel and Lindsay Webster and Faye Stenning. And I have my list and Rebecca Hammond, and I'm going to list off quick things about all of them. And I got it in my brain. Well, what happens, and if you go back and watch this, I look like a Neanderthal who has never stood in front of a camera or spoken before, and it eats at me to this day. It's one of my commentating regrets on the microphone. They didn't turn down the volume for the direction side of things. So all I hear in my ear is, cameraman, go here. Are you in your position yet? Da, da, da. They're yelling to the whole staff, and it's in my ear as I'm trying to talk. And one of the cameraman's name is Kirk, which I couldn't even fathom until hindsight. So I'm here, Kirk, you're going to go live. And I'm like pretty nervous. It's cold. It's brisk in the morning. And it's like, all right, you're on in 10. And they're like, Kirk, go. You got to get up there quicker. Kirk, this guy's yelling at Kirk, me, to go. And I can't even focus on what's happening. And he's in my ear as loud as I'm in your ear right now talking, however you're listening to me. And so the entire time as I'm trying to stumble through my thing, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk, if I'm not. Why are you yelling at me to be somewhere? I didn't understand any of it. And trying to talk. You know how hard it is to talk when we have feedback on here and you hear an echo? I literally stumbled through all that. I don't remember it. I don't even know what I said. I couldn't hear myself think or talk. And that was me on like autopilot, like, I don't know, zombie mode, trying to sort through everything. And then I went up to them and approached them afterwards. Like, that was an absolute disaster. If you go back and watch me try to intro the top 5 contenders, it's the most embarrassing thing I've ever done in my life. The comments are like, who's this guy? This guy's bad. I was like, yeah, I was really bad. Could have helped if you told me you were talking to a guy named Kirk that was a cameraman. Also would have helped if you turned off the volume on the direction side. So that's one of my more embarrassing, like, other side of the sport thing. You're listening to something there. Everything all right on your end?
We noticed a bit of our flashing on our house. It was pulled down. And we saw a squirrel head disappear into it, and I can hear them right now underneath me in the eaves of our house.
Goodness. They'll chew through and
have to get them out of there.
So be careful.
Yeah, they're going to destroy stuff. They're going to wreck shop. I've heard them for the first time. Anyway, not to derail. That is a nightmare, Kirk. A nightmare.
It was a nightmare, and it was my first impression. I asked to help and be there. They paid me for this. And I went there and stumbled over my words while somebody yelled at another Kirk in my ear. And I didn't know how to turn it off. I didn't have access. I didn't know enough about the equipment. It's horrible. Have you ever dealt with that?
Not to that extent. But the first time I did commentary for NBC, you have that. And it's something that people don't understand, I think. Like you said, when you're watching commentators and they have their headset on, the headsets are not just to block out noise. The producer has uninterrupted access to one of your ear cups. And the other side is you and your commentary team. You're hearing live monitoring of that. And you have in front of you, at least we had, a little console. Looked like an ancient video game console. And it has mute buttons on it. And it has volume adjustment. So you can adjust the levels in each ear. So it's to the point where I'm hearing what you're saying, but it's not jarring my brain. And it is disconcerting. We had to do a dry run day one. We practiced, and it took a few minutes to just get used to them talking in your ear while you're talking. It's like a little kid interrupting you when you're trying to say something. It's easy to lose your train of thought. So it is distracting, and it's a talent that commentators have. And if you ever see people on air doing things, it's more impressive than it looks. So I'll give them their flowers on that. But I always had the volume control in front of me where worst case scenario, I could turn someone down. I can't imagine it being turned up full volume and them yelling my name instructions while I'm trying to talk.
Yeah. And it's because they had to hand me a second headset that was being used by one of the staff. That was already set to them to take directions. So that volume was set loud. I didn't have a control panel in front of me. It was on a little box on my hip, which they just didn't want to touch. I didn't know what I was going to do with that thing.
Right.
But I think I don't know, coincidental, like there's not many Kirks in the world. So that one got me really good at the wrong time. So it is what it is. But I can't watch it. I can't go back and watch it because it's embarrassing. 2018 Spartan Race World Champs intros. Ugh.
I'm sorry.
So
that's mad.
Yeah.
And you just want to explain to everyone.
You have a quick one? Yeah, right. You just can't. You have a quick one you want to throw in?
Yeah, the closest I had to that was High Rocks North American Championships, I want to say. I think it was North American Championships. We were commentating and I was remote commentating at the venue. It was too loud where we were set up and you couldn't, the background noise was being picked up by the mics. So they removed me back to a room, not at the venue. So I couldn't see what was going on. I had a picture on my laptop.
That's a whole other thing, by the way.
And I couldn't see it very well. And it was grainy on my end and choppy and constantly misidentifying who was on screen or saying like that. At one point I said, and we haven't seen David Magida in a while now, as he's just running past the screen. Clear as day, it's David Magida on the screen. And I don't know it. I've known David since 2012. I know what David Magida looks like. And I couldn't see him. And then there's this woman named Linda Meyer. And she is a stud. She is a top 10 woman in the world. And every time I said her name that day, I said Linda Blair. Every time. The actress from The Exorcist. Every time. And someone would correct me, and I would make it the next time again.
Isn't that a speed skater?
That's Bonnie Blair.
Blair? Isn't that a
who's a West Dallas girl?
Bonnie Blair.
Gold medalist from West Dallas, Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah.
Linda Blair was the child in The Exorcist, I believe. No, they just share the same first name, Linda Meyer and Linda Blair. Not that familiar, just similar enough. And I said it like 7 times on the broadcast, and someone corrected me in my ear every time, and I'd screw it up the very next sentence. I've never had it that bad to that extent. I just made error after error. And whenever I go back and rewatch, because I rewatch all these things on the treadmill, I have to watch my commentary with it muted because it drives me crazy. So bad.
It's the commentary when we do these remote. I've stepped away a little bit here recently from doing that, but like, yeah, as of you, sure. But like usually if you're doing it remote, you get this like downgraded D version of picture quality feed, and it's only a quarter of the size of what you're watching on your screen because we have other things we're paying attention to. So we're watching ants, and if it's blurry, like you couldn't tell it's David Magida, like it's nearly impossible. And so I've noticed it. I give commentators all the leeway in the world if they misidentify now, or if they're like, I don't know, who is that runner? And be like, it's David Magida, obviously. But like now I get it, but 99.9% of the world doesn't. That it's just not a perfect system sometimes.
Yeah. And of course there's comments like, how do these people not know the sport? It's like, I couldn't tell it was Rich Ryan, Ryan Kent, or David Magida. Like I have roomed with Ryan Kent and David Magida multiple times. Rich Ryan, he is a business partner of ours. Like I know these people and I couldn't identify them. It's so embarrassing.
All right. Well,
let's wrap it.
It's been real, Brakken. It's been real. We've made a lot of mistakes in our years. You know, I had no idea where this was going to go or what we were going to talk about. But every time we catch up like this, I feel like I get to know you a little better in a good way, and we get to riff. And as I said on Tuesday, we've done very calculated and dialed episodes lately, especially on our Tuesdays, where we are teaching you something very specific. So for us, it's nice to just chat with my buddy Brakken. I enjoy this. So hopefully the listeners enjoy it too.
Yeah. Well, they're learning some things about us. That's for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got to wrap. Our time has come. So why don't you sign us off, sir?
Ladies and gentlemen, get out there. Have a great long run this weekend. I hope it goes better than ours. I hope you don't cramp. I hope you don't poop yourself. I hope you don't embarrass yourself. I hope you don't get jumped. And if you do, tell them there's a police car behind them and hit the brakes.
See ya.